Howdy my totally as always Tubular gamers, and we're back with, you guessed it, another ranking video. And today we got another game of the year ranking for you. You know, the Game Awards, it's really right around the corner, and so I thought I'd pump one more of these out. You know, we talked about the RPGs, we talked about the games that won game of the year, but today I'd like to talk about fighting games. Now, fighting games really are one of my favorite genres of games, and over the last 10 years we've gotten some pretty incredible fighting games. Some of the greatest fighting games ever made came out in the last 10 years, and the Game Awards, the big show by Geoff Keighley, has celebrated these fighting games, and they actually do have a category for best fighting game of the year. And so what this video is very similar to the last two videos I made. We're really going to look at all the fighting games that won fighting game of the year, and we're going to rank them from worst to best based on my opinion. Obviously there were a bunch of other great games that were nominated, but today we really are just looking at the games that did win fighting game of the year. And so yes, we will finally have a list where Baldur's Gate 3 is not at the top of the list. And so, you know, as always, let me know down below what your favorite fighting games are, what you want to see me rank, what kind of lists you want to see me make. Please like, share, comment, sub. We got the super thanks and the Patreon going on. Any support is truly and greatly appreciated. Like, seriously, thank you very much for sticking with me over the years and coming back to the channel. It is greatly appreciated, and you people are awesome. All of you, even the people who don't agree with me, you all are awesome too. And so let's just get this show on the road. Of the 10 fighting games that have won fighting game of the year, which do I think is the weakest? Okay, I don't think this is a nuclear take, but of the 10 games that have won fighting game of the year, the one that sticks out to me as the weakest is Multiverses, which won fighting game last year in 2022. Now, Multiverses, I don't know about this game. I just never really was able to get into Multiverses. Like, maybe it was the free-to-play aspect, or the monetization, or the characters, or how you had to buy the characters and it was a little grindy, or the team mechanic, or the really lack of single player, but I just was never really able to get into this game. Now, don't get it twisted, there were certainly plenty of good things with this game. Like, the presentation was actually really top notch, you know? The game looked great, it ran great, it had really authentic, legit voice acting that gets a big thumbs up from me. The control scheme and how the game felt were pretty good. Like, I think the game feels nice, it's got a nice flow to it, and the combat is satisfying. The roster, what is there now, well, when you could play the game at least, there was some classic characters in there like all the Looney Tunes, but then there were more modern characters in here as well, like Rick and Morty, and I like that too. I like the mix. And you know, the roster, yeah, I think it was good. It could obviously be better, and leaks and data mines have suggested that it gets a lot better, but the roster was fine and the online was super smooth. Never had any issues there. I thought it was great. Now, something big to mention about Multiverses, you know, it might not have a ton of content, characters, all that, but it wasn't finished. It wasn't actually released in a 1.0 state. It was still in beta. And so I'm just like, really? This won best fighting game of the year? I mean, it's still in beta, it's still in testing. You can't even play it right now. As I'm recording this video, you cannot play Multiverses. It has temporarily been taken offline, and it will come back in the future. Hopefully it actually does come back. If it didn't, that'd be pretty shitty, but hopefully it comes back. This might be a hot take, but I actually do prefer the Nickelodeon fighting games. You know, they might be lower budget, but I don't know, I just had a better time with those games. And honestly, I don't think Multiverses was the best fighting game of last year. I mean, I wouldn't even say it officially came out because it was just a beta. It was just a testing period, but it was up against DNF Duel, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle R, The King of Fighters 15, and Sifu. Now, haven't tried DNF Duel. Sifu, I haven't played a ton of it, but it seems really awesome. But it's also like not a fighting game. It's like a brawler beat 'em up. I don't know why it's nominated, but whatever. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle R, that really seems more like a re-release or like a director's cut. They have added new characters and some new stuff, but it still really is kind of the PS3 game just expanded on. PS3 game was great. I think this is actually a pretty good fighting game, but in my opinion, the best fighting game of last year was The King of Fighters 15. You know, I didn't hear a ton of people talking about it. The presentation wasn't the best, and it was a little low budget, but this is actually a pretty good fighting game. It's got a good roster, it's got solid mechanics, and I think it's one of the better King of Fighters games from the last couple of years. And the game is still just as difficult to get into as ever. Like, King of Fighters 15 is uncompromising, it is still difficult, it is still stiff as hell, and requires complex button inputs, really good timing, and decent spacing. Yeah, never change KOF, seriously. That was my favorite fighting game that came out last year. Multiverses is cool and all, but fighting game of the year? Nah, not for me at least. And here we have Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate Edition, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2020. Now, the first thing I'm going to immediately say is Mortal Kombat 11 didn't come out in 2020. It came out in 2019. This was just a re-release with more characters and the story DLC. And don't get me wrong, the story DLC was pretty cool, and it was cool the characters they added, but this wasn't a new fighting game. So for it to win Fighting Game of the Year, I think it really shows just how little the Game Awards as an organization actually cares about fighting games, especially in 2020, because I don't think this was the best fighting game of 2020, but this also wasn't a new fighting game at best. At absolute best, it's an enhanced re-release, and at worst, it really is just a re-release. And don't get me wrong, Mortal Kombat 11 is a good game. I've talked about it a couple times on the channel. I've never been that huge on it, and I think it is the weakest of the modern MK games, but I'd still say it is a good game, and it does have some stuff to offer. It has a pretty good roster. I like the story mode. I like the story itself. The story DLC is cool also. The online seemed fine enough, but when it came to the fighting itself, it was just a little too slow for me, and it wasn't combo heavy at all. And for a while, I thought this was a really hot take, but after ranking all the Mortal Kombat games, this doesn't seem to be the hottest take. Look, 11's good, but a lot of the other Mortal Kombats are better. But what was this game up against? It was up against Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, One Punch Man, A Hero Nobody Knows, Street Fighter V Champion Edition, so another not new game, and it was up against Under Night In-Birth EXE Late. Now, out of all of these games, which do I think was the best fighting game of the year? Honestly, I think it's Under Night. I think Under Night's a pretty solid anime fighter. It's got a good feel to it, it's satisfying, and it's fun. The cast of characters is all over the place, and it does feel kind of budget, especially in the presentation, but I still think this is a more than solid enough fighting game that did not get enough attention just because it looks a bit generic and it's an anime fighter. Grand Blue Fantasy Versus is another really good one. One Punch Man, I never tried this game. I never heard like anything about this game, so I just couldn't really even comment. And then Street Fighter V Champion Edition, why is this nominated? Like, if you don't have 5 fighting games to nominate because you wouldn't dare look at the indie games, then just nominate 4. They've done it in the past. I feel like I've just been complaining about the Game Awards for this entire entry, but it's totally whack. Like, I get it. 2020 was not ideal for fighting games. There wasn't a ton of great fighting games released, and people couldn't go to in-person tournaments or anything like that because of COVID. But how on earth did Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate Edition win? It didn't even come out initially in 2020. Like, MK11, it's a fine fighting game. I do have some issues with it. I have had some fun with it. I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend it over most Mortal Kombat games, but it's a decent enough game. But fighting game of the year, not in my opinion. And here we have Street Fighter V, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2016. Now, Street Fighter V, I'll be real, in 2016, I was not a fan of this game at all, just due to the lack of characters, lack of content, broken online. Like, I did not really like Street Fighter V for quite a while. Nowadays, yeah, I think it is a pretty decent game. The mechanics are alright, the roster is good, and the content is good. I still don't like the art style though. I just have never liked this art style like at all, especially compared to other Street Fighter games. Speaking of other Street Fighter games though, I did rank every Street Fighter game. I ranked every Capcom fighting game. Yes, every single Capcom fighting game. It's like a 3-hour video. I'm gonna put it somewhere on screen in the description as well, please. That would be awesome if you checked out even 30 seconds of it. But Street Fighter V in 2016, it was definitely not my go-to fighting game. But hey, it won Fighting Game of the Year from the Game Awards. You know, it's just one publication. It just happens to be the one with the most notoriety and buzz behind it, but they decided it was the best fighting game of the year. But if you look at what it was up against, I could kind of see why. You know, it was up against Killer Instinct Season 3, not Killer Instinct, just Season 3. It was up against the King of Fighters 14 and Pokken Tournament. Now, Killer Instinct, the revival at least, I think is a pretty solid fighting game. I'd actually rather play that than Street Fighter V, but this was just Season 3 nominated, so I don't know how that's going to beat a full fighting game, full air quotes. King of Fighters 14, yeah, this game's pretty good. I don't know if I'd say it's better than Street Fighter V, but I think 14's okay. I do have some issues with it, but it's okay. Pokken Tournament, well, I've made it no secret in the past, I'm just not really big on this game. I've just never enjoyed it all that much. From when it originally came out to trying it in a Japanese arcade and then the Switch version, I was just never big on it. You know, I just don't really love how it feels, and would take legit any Tekken game over Pokken Tournament. So I can see why Street Fighter V won. Nowadays, I kind of look at this and cringe a little because I'm like, oh. But it just shows, I guess, where fighting games were in 2016, which clearly was not a great place. In terms of brand new fighting games that year, it wasn't a great place. But Street Fighter V, again, it's an alright game, especially nowadays. But back then, you wouldn't catch me playing that. And here we have Injustice 2, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2017. Now, Injustice 2, I actually have not talked about this game on the channel before, and it's a pretty solid 2D fighting game. It's easily the best DC fighting game, and I'd say it's one of the best DC games, period, outside of the Batman Arkham series. It's actually pretty solid. The game looks great. I like the story. I think the roster is actually really strong, and the game has a nice feel to it. Is it a little slow? Yeah, it is a little slow, and I don't know how I feel about all the outside interference, like jumping around the stage or all the stuff you can pick up and throw, but I think Injustice 2, it is a good fighting game. I know it didn't catch on in the same way that Mortal Kombat has, but I'm hoping, maybe we get an Injustice 3 in the future. I think that would be cool. Now, do I think Injustice 2 was the best fighting game in 2017? Absolutely not. Not even close, in my opinion. So let me tell you what it was up against. It was up against ARMS, it was up against Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, it was up against Needhog 2, and then Tekken 7. Now, if you don't know me, I'm Jonathan, nice to meet you, hope all is well and good with the family. Now, one of my favorite, if not my favorite fighting game series of all time is Tekken. I love Tekken, have since a little kid, and I still very much love Tekken. I'm really excited for Tekken 8, but Tekken 7 is like my favorite Tekken game of them all. Like, it feels the best, I love the roster, the game looks incredible, it is really solid online. Tekken 7, it's like the best Tekken game, or one of the best Tekken games. And I remember being genuinely really surprised it did not win Fighting Game of the Year. I was like, wait, seriously? Tekken 7 didn't win? And all these years later, yeah, I still am surprised. How did Tekken 7 not win? Tekken 7 whoops some ass. Okay, but aside from Tekken 7, what about the other games Injustice 2 was up against? I could say Injustice 2 is better than those games. Needhog 2 didn't really put much time into it, but it was alright for what it was. ARMS, I just never really got all that into it. I did play it at release. I played quite a bit of it, but then it just didn't stick with me. I think it was just more of like, I was really into the Switch since it was new, but it lost its luster, at least with me. And then Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, that game sucked. I did rank it though in every Capcom fighting game rank, so you could check that out. Injustice 2, it's a good game. I still think Tekken 7 is better, but you know what they say, it is what it is. And here we have Dragon Ball FighterZ, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2018. Now, this is one year where, yes, I think the right game actually won. Dragon Ball FighterZ is, at least in my opinion, one of the best fighting games of the last decade. It is easily the best of the Dragon Ball fighting games, and it seriously kicks some ass all these years later. It even just got an update adding like rollback, balancing, etc. They're still updating this game now because there's still a ton of people playing it because it's a great game. It has a great roster with so many awesome beloved Dragon Ball characters, and not to mention the DLC and just the many Gokus that have been added. Seriously, the roster is great. The game has a fantastic look to it. I love the presentation of fighters, especially in combination with the sound effects. Like, this game is really satisfying when it comes to the sound effects and then how it feels. The game feels great. It has a really nice flow to it and pace. It's got really solid intuitive controls. Like, this game is the total package. It is great. I'm hoping someday I can rank the Dragon Ball fighting games, but I'm kind of spoiling my top pick right here. FighterZ, it's a great game. I have no problem recommending it to people who love fighting games. But what was it up against in 2018? Well, there's actually two other games that are pretty solid fighting games. It was up against BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle and Soul Calibur 6. And somehow Street Fighter V Arcade Edition was nominated, even though it won 2 years prior. No, we're not even going to discuss that. That's the third time I'd bring up Street Fighter V. Now, BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle, this is also a really good anime fighter. It's got a great roster. It feels nice, and I haven't put a ton of time into it, but I like what I've played. And Soul Calibur 6 is one of my favorite Soul Caliburs. It's probably my favorite one outside of 2. One day I'm going to rank the Soul Calibur games, and maybe it's a hot take, but I really do love 6. I think 6 is a real return to form for the series after the kind of lackluster 4 and 5, at least in my opinion, lackluster. Like, 6 really sped the gameplay up. It made it faster, smoother, more intuitive, and it had a pretty good roster also. I liked the roster in this game. I'd say 6 is my number 2 pick for this year, but it's not going to be able to top FighterZ. FighterZ is just a great fighting game, and the right game won. The right game definitely won here. And here we have Mortal Kombat X, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2015. Now, like MK11, I have talked a few times about MKX, and I think it is a really great game. I'd say it's maybe the best Mortal Kombat game of them all. It's either this or 9. In terms of sheer fighting, I think this game is the best of the Mortal Kombat games. I think it has a really great speed, it's incredibly satisfying, and then it has a really good roster. In terms of the story mode and maybe the crypt, it's not my favorite. I think 9 is better in those aspects, but I'm not really going to deny that MKX has better moment-to-moment action and gameplay. Like, it's stupid violent, but it's also a ton of fun. I have had a bunch of fun with this game for years now, and, you know, coming back all these years later, this game has aged incredibly well, not just graphically, but in terms of how it feels and how it is to play. Like, it still is great, and it was, in my opinion, easily the best fighting game of 2015. Like, 2015, I'll just be real, it wasn't the strongest year for fighting games. It was only up against 3 other games, and 2 of them I haven't even played. It was up against Rising Thunder and Rise of the Incarnates, which, yeah, I just have no experience with, to be honest. I know it feels like I've played every game like ever, but nothing for those. And then it was also up against Guilty Gear Xrd Sign, and while I think that game is pretty good and one of the best Guilty Gear games, MKX is more my style and, in my opinion, the better game. I'm gonna cut it short here because I have reviewed MKX twice now, but all I can say is if you like Mortal Kombat, if you like 2D fighting games and you haven't tried it and you can stomach the violence, then yeah, I think it is worth trying, and it is a great fighting game. And here we have Guilty Gear Strive, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2021. Now, when it came to the games that were nominated for Fighting Game of the Year, it seemed like a pretty open and shut case that Guilty Gear Strive was the best one by kind of a landslide, and I absolutely think it's worthy of just completely dominating the competition. Guilty Gear Strive is a great game. It's one of, if not the best Guilty Gear game of them all. It has a really great roster. It looks amazing. Like, seriously, this game looks incredible. I love how this game looks. It has an amazing aesthetic and vibe to it. The music is really great. The sound effects are good. It has a story that I still don't really understand. But then when it comes to the fighting, ooh, I love the fighting of Guilty Gear Strive. I think it just feels so good. Like, it's satisfying. It's intuitive. It's smooth. The controls are great. Like, Strive is a great game. It is, again, just like FighterZ Fighters, it is one of the best fighting games of the last 10 years and arguably the best anime fighter of the last decade. I just don't think they get any better than this. I have nothing but praise for Guilty Gear Strive. What was it up against? It was up against the Demon Slayer fighting game, Melty Blood Type Lumina, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, and Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown. I'm gonna just throw Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown out of there. That game is like a decade old. I don't know why that was nominated. Enhanced re-release or not, it shouldn't be there. When it comes to the Demon Slayer fighting game, I just haven't tried it. You know, I'm not huge on arena fighters. I'm not huge on Demon Slayer. I know some of the characters and that's about it. Melty Blood Type Lumina, I think that's a pretty solid game. It's an improvement on the original Melty Blood. I don't feel like I should be in a bathroom on a laptop playing it. The presentation is decent here. Obviously, it still is budget and it is a budget anime fighter, but there's actually a ton of fun to be had here. I've actually had quite a bit of fun over the years with this one. It's a good one. And the Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, you want to talk about really budget. We got this game. I just recently talked about it. I think it's a good game, but I can definitely see why it did not win Fighting Game of the Year. But to keep it 100 in here, I'd rather play All-Star Brawl than Multiverses. I'm pretty sure that's a hot take, but that's just how I feel. Guilty Gear Strive, though, huge recommendation if you haven't tried it already, especially if you like anime fighters. Like, fighting games, especially traditional fighting games, really just don't get any better than this, but somehow we're not at the top of the list. There's a few more games to talk about, but if you have not tried Guilty Gear Strive, I do not know what you're waiting for. It's even on Game Pass. And here we have Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2014. Now, I know there's been an argument forever that Smash Bros. Isn't a fighting game and it's just a party game, yada yada yada. Well, you know what? It won Fighting Game of the Year here, so that's why I'm including it and talking about it. And in my opinion, at least, it was the best fighting game of 2014. 2014, it wasn't the strongest year for fighting games. There was a couple good ones here, but in my opinion, it was just kind of a no-brainer to go with Smash for Wii U. I mean, when it comes to Smash Bros. For Wii U, I know we kind of look at it nowadays and laugh and go, why would you ever play it? And I agree. Why would you ever want to go back and play it? Ultimate is literally just Wii U, but better. But hey, in 2014, Smash for Wii U, it was one of the best Smash games, if not like the best Smash Brothers game of them all. And for a lot of people, Smash for Wii U really was a return to form after Brawl being slower, having tripping, and less focus on tech. They were really into Wii U, and yeah, I think the moment-to-moment gameplay, the actual combat, the fighting itself, I think it is better than Brawl's. I like the speed, I like the little bit of tech that they brought back. I think the game feels great, and even nowadays, it still does play really nice. Of course, I'm gonna definitely prefer how Ultimate feels and plays, but this was a step in the right direction for sure. When it came to the roster, I think it was pretty good also. There was some really great newcomers in there like Mega Man, which I know nobody plays as these days, but I liked Mega Man. And I remember going nuts for Duck Hunt, especially when it got leaked. I mean, I could spend all day talking about the Smash Brothers leaks, but we're not going to do that. I love the roster of this game. I think it was a good improvement on Brawl. There was some missing characters, but it wasn't the end of the world. The game looked nice. It had a great soundtrack, a phenomenal soundtrack actually, and then it had a good amount of content. I don't know if there was as much content as Brawl, and I didn't really like the whole Mario Party mode on the Wii U version, but there was a good amount of content, and I had a ton of fun with this game. I played this game for years until Ultimate came out, and then I haven't really touched it since. So maybe this game loses some brownie points for longevity, but I mean, it's not really this game's fault that it got decimated by the follow-up. But what was it up against? It was up against Killer Instinct Season 2, just Season 2. It was up against Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS, and Ultra Street Fighter 4. So yeah, it wasn't exactly up against new games. Killer Instinct Season 2, the game came out a year earlier. Season 2 was cool and all, but it wasn't a new game. Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, you know, despite being basically an enhanced re-release, I mean, I guess I could say it was kind of a new fighting game. It was more of a new fighting game than Mortal Kombat 11, I'll give it that. Ultra Street Fighter 4, this really was just a new version of Street Fighter 4, and then Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS, yeah, this was a new version, but I don't think anybody's talking about the 3DS version of Smash Brothers these days. Like, forget nowadays. Even going back to 2014, I remember once the Wii U game came out, nobody was talking about the 3DS game, and I don't see anybody talking about the 3DS game nowadays unless they're talking about the series as a whole, and then maybe it'll get a brief mention at the end, and that's it. Like, the 3DS game, no. We don't need to talk about that. Of all of these games, the best is Wii U, and I still think it is a pretty great fighting game. And here we have 2023's fighting game, which as I'm recording this video has not been decided yet, but in my opinion, the best fighting game of 2023 is Street Fighter 6, and it's what I believe will be fighting game of the year. But before I continue, I just want to say that this was actually a really great year for fighting games. Like, I'm looking at the games that were nominated, and there's like no re-releases here. These are all actually new fighting games, no Ultimate Edition or Arcade Edition or whatever the fuck name they're going to give their re-release. No, there's no re-releases here. They're all new fighting games, and they all kick some serious ass. Like, you know, I've said it plenty of times, 2023 may be the greatest year in gaming, but for fighting games, it was a really good year. We ate really good. The games that were nominated were God of Rock, Mortal Kombat 1, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2, Pocket Bravery, and of course Street Fighter 6. Now, God of Rock and Pocket Bravery, don't really have much experience with those, to be honest, but Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2, I also recently talked about. I ranked all the Nickelodeon crossover games, and I think this game is great. I think it's a huge improvement on the first one. They added a bunch of tech, and it's really solid. They actually upped the budget as well. I enjoy this game. And then Mortal Kombat 1, I also think it's pretty good. I enjoy this game much more than Mortal Kombat 11. I really like the setting and the story and the characters. I think the fighting is smoother and better than 11's. It's faster. I enjoy it, and I'm really excited to see where they take it. There's a bunch of BS microtransactions in there, though. But in terms of being a fighting game, yes, I think MK1 is very good. But Street Fighter 6, oh man, Street Fighter 6 is like maybe the best fighting game Capcom's ever made. It is so good. It is so smooth. It feels so great. I love the controls. I love the different options you have for the controls. I think the roster, for being a base roster and not super ultra arcade edition or whatever, is really good. I like the single player. This is really cool. The online's really smooth. I like the character customization. I like how you walk around and you interact with players. You can play a bunch of other Street Fighter games. I like how they've been updating it so far with more DLC characters and costumes, which are pretty overpriced, I'm not going to lie to you, but I like how they're updating the game. Like, I think Street Fighter 6 is going to have a lot of longevity. I think a couple years from now, we're really going to be talking about how great Street Fighter 6 was when it came out. Like, this game is the complete package. It really is the complete package for a fighting game, and I can just say, if you've ever had even a basic amount of interest in any fighting game, not just Street Fighter, any fighting game, I think SF6 is a great game place to start. It's really user friendly, it's intuitive, and you could get into fighting games as a whole with it. It's just that user friendly, and it's really nice because it's not simplified or dumbed down either. The game still has depth, it has some really great mechanics, and I've had a ton of fun with it already. It's one of my favorite games of this year. It's, again, my favorite fighting game of this year, and really, zero problem recommending it. Like, 2023 was awesome, and Street Fighter 6, this game was great. It really was a great game. And then we have Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2019. Now, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, oh, we could be here legit all day. I have so much to say about this game. It is one of my favorite games of all time. and it is just a fantastic game through and through. If you've ever liked Smash Brothers, this is the game to play. It's the most tournament viable, it has the most amount of characters, a shit ton of content, stages, you name it, it has everything. It is more than the complete package. It is the completer package. It is the completionist package if you actually, donated the money, but that's unrelated. Smash Bros. Ultimate, it was my most hyped game maybe ever. Seriously, ever. Like, I've been crazy hyped since day one. I'm still super hype about this game. It just is so good on every level. The moment-to-moment gameplay, the fighting, it is amazing. It feels great. It is great. It's satisfying, it's smooth, it's easy to pick up and play, it's really hard to master. There's tech here, there's so much to learn. All the characters, a lot of the characters anyway, feel really different from each other. The roster is just unparalleled to any video game. No video game has had such a great roster. Like, the roster is incredible, especially after all the DLC. It is unmatched, unparalleled. It does not get any better when it comes to a fighting game roster. It just doesn't. How does it get any better? Well, you add Gino, but aside from Gino, it's a perfect roster. It's so good. There's so many amazing characters. Everyone came back. There's a bunch of good newcomers. The newcomers they have are great. I love King K. Rool. I love Ridley. And then this game has a ton of content. I know some people aren't big on Classic or the Adventure Story mode, but I loved both of these, man. I played this game for like 12 hours straight the day it came out. I was so excited, and I have played so much of this game, legit hundreds of hours. I love Ultimate to death. It is one of my favorite games of all time, not even close. I think it's the best fighting game of not only the last 10 years, but like ever. Seriously, I think it is that good, that it is maybe the best fighting game ever made. I'm sure a bunch of people are ready to disagree with me in the comments. You let me know down below why you agree or disagree or whatever it is you want to say. And I'll be the first to admit, yeah, the online kind of sucks. It's never been great. Switch online has never been the best, but I can look past that because the game just has so much else going for it. But what else was it actually up against that year? Well, this was actually a pretty good year for fighting games. It was up against Dead or Alive 6, Jump Force, Mortal Kombat 11, and Samurai Showdown. All of these were original first releases of games, so that gets a thumbs up from me. Jump Force, that's the odd one out here. I've played a few hours of it. I've laughed at it for a few hours, and maybe one day I'll give it a real shot, but that day is not today. Dead or Alive 6, one of the best Dead or Alive games, an improvement over 5. I actually quite like 6. 6 is pretty good. Mortal Kombat 11, I've talked more than enough about that game already. And then Samurai Showdown. If Ultimate wasn't going to win Fighting Game of the Year, Samurai Showdown would be my pick. This game is great. It is the best of the Samurai Showdown games. I actually ranked all the Samurai Showdown games as well. Man, I'm just plugging all my videos out here, but seriously, they're all good videos. I worked a long time on some of them, but Samurai Showdown is a great game with a great aesthetic. It feels really great. I love how they really returned to form for the series and had a good throwback, but also reimagining of what Samurai Showdown should be. It's gory, it's brutal, you can kill people in like 2 or 3 hits, and then they had a solid roster as well. Samurai Showdown, it's a really good fighting game as well that unfortunately didn't get the love it deserves. I mean, I don't really see that many people talking about it nowadays, and that's a real shame because I think it deserved more love than it got. But that's it for today's video. We just gushed about Smash Brothers for a while and talked about some other games. Okay, it was more than that, but hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think down below. If you made it to this part of the video, the word we're going with today is cement, as in what's in the ground. So if you made it to this part of the video, comment that down below and you get a heart from me. That's like our secret code word, and then we'll confuse everyone else in the comments. Either way, hope you have a wonderful day. Enjoy the Game Awards. I'll be watching for sure. And that's it. Bye-bye.